determine the length of the chromosome and how to determine whether an organism contains multiple chromosomes. So then we started with isolation of genomic DNA. So
Ma'am, but ma'am, but in the case of electrophoresis, what will happen if there are topoisomers are present? Like in that case, like when we have to separate different types of different topoisomers, we use the same
right,
electrophoresis. Then how
right.
can
Right, so Ratnesh, we are going to
okay?
discuss all of these questions in a little more detail. So there are ways to figure it out. So in this case, for example, when you are imagining that there are topoisomers, so in this case, ideally, after electrophoresis, it has to be followed by southern blotting, where you can use specific probes to figure out like which are binding to one particular type of chromosome in the they are not binding to the other bands, something like this, but we'll be discussing that. There are ways to sort this out.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay, we'll be discussing all of these in detail, don't worry. Okay, so because we had started with the genome organization and its structure in prokaryotes and eukaryotes, so the next topic was genome analysis. So how to analyze the genome, how to determine the length of the chromosome, how to determine whether an organism contains multiple chromosomes, how to determine whether an organism contains one big chromosome and the other one is a megaplasmid. So there can be multiple questions that can be answered, and for that what you need is you need to isolate the genomic DNA. And if you remember in the last class we discussed that we can do isolation of genomic DNA from bacterial cells or from eukaryotic cells, for example plant cells, bone tissue, yeast cells, etc. And then the first step is breaking of cells, where we discussed the 5 methods you remember from the last class: mechanical homogenization, chemical method, enzymatic lysis, pressure based lysis, or freeze thaw method. So, in fact, let us discuss the methods which are used for the isolation of genomic DNA from gram negative and gram positive bacteria. When we talk about gram negative and gram positive bacteria from the last class, what is the main difference that you remember in the method of mechanical lysis? Or you forgot? Positive bacteria require what? Sorry, what happened to my class? Don't sleep. Dev Priya. So what is the method of mechanical cell disruption for gram positive bacteria? We discussed in the last class. Don't remember Ratnesh, Ashi, Vishantan? सब भूल गया?
Ma'am, we use enzymes for gram-positive bacteria.
Right, they require enzymes, and these enzymes they are required for breaking the d-alanine peptidoglycan bond. It's there in the peptidoglycan layer. It breaks the bond between d-alanine and d-alanine. We use lysozyme, or we also enzyme is used mostly for gram-positive bacteria like actinobacteria, but lysostaphin is used for particularly streptomyces. Gram-negative bacteria, we do not require any kind of enzymatic treatment. So for gram-negative bacteria, in fact, what we can do is we can simply go for freeze. But before that class, please try to understand that what we do is that we use a buffer called TRISCL buffer. So when we want to isolate the genomic DNA, the chromosomal DNA from bacterial cells, first requirement is cells, correct? Now you can isolate the genomic DNA from a single colony right, from one single colony. And class, one single colony contains how many cells? One single colony on a Petri plate. Oh, you people have done microbiology labs or no?
No, ma'am.
Oh, acha. But so can you imagine a colony or no? Difficult to imagine.
I guess we can imagine.
We can imagine, but I don't know number. How many number?
Contains 1 million cells, right? So we can isolate the chromosomal DNA from one single colony, or we can isolate it from a larger amount. So it depends on the requirement. So for example, if you are interested in only a small amount of genomic DNA just to see, for example, just to identify the particular strain, so in that case you can simply do colony prep, where you can isolate the genomic DNA from a single colony, or you can prepare in large amounts. So for that you can grow cells in LB. LB is a medium. In LB medium, it's a growth medium, right? LB is actually Luria broth, and Luria broth in fact contains yeast extract, tryptone and sodium chloride, right? So what you do is you grow the cells in Luria broth medium, and then you allow them to grow overnight, means usually 15 hours. So what is the doubling time of E. coli class? These things you cannot afford to forget. I will keep asking you in every class. And students, the other thing I wanted to tell you is that biology and genetics is a very basic course, and you will have many courses which are built upon these courses. So for example, you will study genomics and proteomics, and you will find that the basics that you have learned in this course will come to use. Likewise, there is another course which is again a core course, recombinant DNA technology, BBL 733. So that is also a core course, and you will find that the basics that you have learned in this course will come to use in that course as well, right? So please try to get the concepts. Even if you do not remember the terms, it is fine, but you should get the concepts that gram positive require enzymes, gram negative do not require enzymes, something like this. And what is the doubling time of E. coli? One colony is 1 million cells. Like, these things are very basics. Nobody will again tell you all of these. Okay. So E. coli, what is the doubling time, class? You know or you do not know?
With some 15-20 minutes.
Right, so it is 20 minutes. So therefore, depending upon the amount of cells that you start with, for example, if you are starting with one colony in, let's say, 100 ml media, then the expected OD is going to be 0.0001. So accordingly, the cells have to grow to a considerable amount up to stationary phase, and then you proceed for isolation of genomic DNA, right? So once you have grown the cells, right, so what you do is overnight grown cells, class, overnight grown cells in LB, right, they are harvested. Harvested means they are centrifuged, right? Centrifugation is a method where you separate the cells from the broth. Correct. So overnight grown cells in LB are harvested by centrifuging them, and then in this case you use an RPM of about 12,000 RPM, right? So this is the speed at which you can actually separate the cells from the medium, correct? It becomes very important. So in this case, you are using 12,000 RPM for 5 minutes. But for certain delicate applications, you do not use that high speed, because when we use a very high speed, then cells also sometimes lyse. So depending upon the application, the speed varies. So for genomic DNA and plasmid DNA isolation, class 12,000 RPM is fine. So what you do is you separate the cells from the medium and then you resuspend the cells in a buffer which consists of TrisCl. So as I told you, I'm not going to give you the concentrations etc. Those are details that you will be preparing it and using it when you will be coming to the labs. But just to give you the concepts, so in this case the buffer contains TrisCl and EDTA. So TrisCl is actually, it's just a buffer, but what is the purpose of EDTA? What is EDTA? Have you heard of this term, class?
Yes, ma'am. I mean, it's a ligand like ethylene diamine triacetic acid.
Yeah, ethylene diamine tetraacetic acid, and what it does is that it actually chelates magnesium ions. Okay. So these magnesium ions, they are present in the cell membrane. So when it chelates these magnesium ions, then it actually destabilizes the membrane. Right? What we do is that once you resuspend it in TrisCl and EDTA, then the next step is we treat these cells with a detergent. And the detergent that is used is SDS.
Ma'am, just a second. What's the function of TrisCl?
It has just a buffering action, so it maintains. So when we use the TrisCl buffer, so this has a pH of around 8. So this is just to maintain the cells in their proper morphology, right? So this is just a, and then we add EDTA. So this buffer actually contains TrisCl and EDTA together. After that, we add detergent, which is sodium dodecyl sulfate. This is actually an anionic detergent class. And what it does is it actually lyses the cell membrane. Right? So when we lyse the cell membrane, what are the components in the cell? You will have chromosomal DNA. What else is there, class?
Proteins and
proteins.
RNA and more whatever.
RNA or
Various sugars or fats.
right, sugars or fats or lipids, remnants of those, right? So then, but we are interested only and only in the chromosomal DNA. Right, because our purpose is to isolate the chromosomal DNA. This will also, sometimes there are some cells which can contain plasmids as well. So our, for example, our interest is only and only to isolate the chromosomal DNA. So in this case, how to separate all of these? So what we use is, class, we use an enzyme called proteinase K, and this proteinase K can actually degrade proteins. So it will take care of proteins. So when we add proteinase K and then you incubate the entire solution, I mean the whole preparation which contains TrisCl EDTA, wherein you have added SDS also. So in the same prep, now you add proteinase K and then you incubate at 55 degrees Celsius for 1 hour. So in this case, when we talk about gram-positive bacteria, the amount of incubation can vary. So for gram-positive, it can be even up to 3 hours, depending upon the type of bacteria. So this will take care of proteins. It will denature the proteins. For removing RNA, we actually use what is called as RNases. So RNases will remove RNA. So now you have actually plasmids. You also have sugars or lipids. So how to get rid of them? So for this purpose, what we do is that we prepare a solution of class phenol is to chloroform. Okay. So what is phenol and what is chloroform? So when we talk about phenol, this is actually tris saturated, phenol, that means it has a pH which is alkaline. Okay, so this is important because when we do RNA isolation class, we use acidic phenol, but for chromosomal DNA isolation, we use a neutral pH or alkaline phenol, and then we use chloroform. So when we usually amyl alcohol in the ratio of 24:1. And this phenol is to chloroform. This whole phenol is to chloroform. Followed. So what when we use phenol chloroform mixture, so this is usually example, if this whole mixture is something in the range of 500 microliter, then you are going to add 500 microliter of phenol chloroform mixture, and this 500 microliter will contain 1:1 of phenol and chloroform. And chloroform is present in the form of chloroform isoamyl alcohol in the ratio of 24:1. So once we do this, right, then what you do is you vortex vigorously and then centrifuge. So what will happen is this will result in the formation of a biphasic mixture, right? Because the above phase, which contains the chromosomal DNA, the SDS, tris-Cl, all of these will form the aqueous phase, correct? Phenol chloroform will be the organic phase. So you are actually forming a biphasic mixture. When we do this vortexing and then when we centrifuge, then from the biphasic mixture, you will have an aqueous phase and you will have an organic phase. So what you will find is that all the denatured proteins, right? All the lipids, carbohydrates, all the cellular debris, right? Everything will appear as precipitate at the interface. So you will find at the interface of aqueous and organic phase, all the denatured proteins, cellular debris, lipids, carbohydrates, everything will appear at the interface, and actually the aqueous phase will contain the genomic DNA and also the plasmid DNA. Now the question is, we have now reached at a level when we have separated proteins, RNA, cellular debris, right, and also carbohydrates and lipids. So now we have in the aqueous phase chromosomal DNA and the plasmid DNA. So now the question is how to separate the chromosomal DNA from the plasmid DNA. So in general, what people do is that they use what is called as 2 volumes of ethanol or 0.8 volumes of isopropanol. What happens is that when we add these solvents, then the chromosomal DNA and the plasmid DNA will separate. But what will happen is, because the chromosomal DNA is larger in size, so plasmids which are smaller in size, like small supercoiled plasmids, they will separate out, and the chromosomal DNA, because of its larger size, it will actually appear as strands. Okay, and these strands will appear like you can see visibly by your naked eyes. They will appear as white strands and they will be very slimy. They will be like your Maggi noodles. So you can pick it with a tip, and then the way you swirl around with a fork. So here you are going to because of their larger size, we can separate chromosomal DNA from the smaller plasmid DNA. Again, the question is if the bacterial strain contains chromate or if the bacterial strain contains megaplasmids, then the megaplasmids or the chromates would also come along with the genomic DNA. So this method is used for separation of genomic DNA from small plasmids. You actually collect the strands which is visible in the picture shown here. So over here, this is the figure which will make things a little clearer. So you have cells, and then they have not mentioned Tris-Cl ETTA, but you do treatment with Tris-Cl ETTA in case of gram-negative bacteria, and in case of gram-positive bacteria, you are going to treat it with enzymes, lysozyme or lysostaphin. In the presence of Tris-Cl and ETTA, this is followed by adding STS and proteinase K. So STS will lyse the membrane as it is shown in this figure, the second one, and then proteinase K will remove the proteins. It actually denatures the proteins, degrade the proteins, and therefore you will have a cell lysate. Now to this we add PCIA. So PCIA is nothing but phenol chloroform isoamyl alcohol, which I described you just now. Phenol chloroform isoamyl alcohol, and what is shown in the figure is the biphasic solution. So the upper phase is the aqueous phase, the lower phase is the one which is shown in yellow, which contains the phenol chloroform isoamyl alcohol. So all the lipids, they will collect at the bottom, and then at the interface actually you will see some denatured proteins, cellular debris, some of the lipids, carbohydrates, etc. And what you see is that the chromosomal DNA and plasmids, they appear in the aqueous phase, which is the upper phase, correct? So what you do is you transfer the upper aqueous phase, and then to precipitate the DNA we add the isopropanol or ethanol, 2 volumes of ethanol, and then you can see these strands, and these strands can be collected with a pipette tip. Is it clear, class?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Everybody is quiet today. Okay, so once you have isolated the genomic DNA class, the next step is electrophoresis. So electrophoresis is used for analyzing the genomic DNA, whether the prep is good or not. But then this electrophoresis can be of two types: analytical electrophoresis or preparative electrophoresis. So analytical electrophoresis, as the term itself says, when you are performing electrophoresis for just analyzing the preparation, right? And preparative electrophoresis, when you are performing electrophoresis for preparing, that means for isolating, for preparing in large amounts. So that is why there are two terms, analytical and preparative. So accordingly the gels are called analytical gels or preparative gels. So let's discuss the basics of electrophoresis first. So the term electrophoresis was coined by Tiselius in 1937, and electrophoresis actually depicts migration of charged particles in a liquid medium under an electric field. Now liquid medium was the term which was used earlier, but now the class is aware of that not only liquid medium, but these days a variety of support media are available, and we are going to discuss these. So all kinds of biological molecules can be separated by electrophoresis. You can separate amino acids, you can separate proteins, you can separate nucleotides, you can separate nucleic acids, everything. So that means when I say nucleotides, nucleic acids, that means you can achieve single nucleic acid separation, and you can separate oligonucleotides, you can separate large DNAs. So all kinds of separations are possible. You can separate individual amino acids, you can separate peptides, and you can separate proteins. The migration depends upon the charge of the particle. So depending upon the charge on the particle, you can have migration towards anode or cathode. So tell me, class, what is the charge on DNA?
Negative.
Negative. So it will migrate to cathode or anode? Don't sleep. कहाँ गए मेरे students? ध्वनि.
Anode, ma'am.
People are there or left? Gopika, are you there? Rishita?
Yes, ma'am.
Sleep class. हाँ. So tell me. Jaskin Singh.
Yes, ma'am.
हाँ. Tell me the answer.
It will migrate to anode because it's negatively charged.
Right. What about others? Deepak? Ayush?
Go towards the anode because it is DNA is negatively charged and anode is positively charged, so they will attract each other.
Okay, very good. Okay, so then the separation in electrophoresis actually depends upon a number of parameters. So what are the parameters from this part that you can imagine of?
And first one is charge.
Yes, very good. Charge, right?
And second can be the size.
Yes, very good, Deepak. Size.
Molecular weight.
Molecular weight, size, charge, yes. Next, Pavan. Ayush. Ayush Verma is left maybe.
No, ma'am.
Huh. Tell. So size, charge.
Oh, ma'am, it can depend on gel also, like
Right.
dielectric constant or maybe viscosity or.
Yes, very good, Ratnesh. So it can depend upon the gel. So in this case, let us not use the term gel. Let us call it as the choice of support media, because gel is one type of electrophoresis, but you can have gel-free electrophoresis as well. So let us use the term support media, okay? So fourth is support media. What else? Dhwani?
Ma'am, electrode potential between cathode and anode.
Yes, very good. So that is like field strength. Now one last. Rishita? So it also sometimes depends upon the temperature, because when the gels get heated up, the separation will be different. So this slide tells you what are the various parameters on which the rate of migration depends upon: net electrical charge on the molecule, size and shape of the molecule. So here we talk about, when we say shape, it's the conformation of the molecule. So for example, proteins or nucleic acids, they can have same sizes, but depending upon the conformation, the the separation can vary. It depends upon the field strength, it depends upon the choice of the support media, and also it depends upon the temperature of operation. So based upon this class, the term electrophoretic mobility is denoted by the symbol mu. So this electrophoretic mobility mu is defined as velocity of the charged particle per unit field strength. I think I need to share it again. I'm sorry, there was some issue with the internet. Class, can you hear me or no?
Oh, we can hear you.
Yes, ma'am, we can hear you.
Oh, so do I need to turn on the recording again or it will continue? Who knows?
And the recording is on.
Recording is on. Okay, thanks. Okay, so we were discussing electrophoretic mobility. So it's defined as velocity of the charged particle per unit field strength. So when we talk about the support media, the various support media that are used particularly for molecular biology work are agarose and polyacrylamide. For certain other kind of work, cellulose acetate and Whatman filter paper are also used as the support media. So let me explain you a little bit about agarose. So agarose gel electrophoresis, but as age, agarose gel electrophoresis is actually done for the separation of both. So there is a misconception. So it is done for the separation of both nucleic acids as well as proteins. So I'll be discussing first the example of nucleic acids and then I will be explaining you later that how it can be used for separation of proteins. So first, to understand what is agarose made up of. So agarose is actually made up of a polymer. It's a polymer of galactose and 3,6 hydro galactose. So it's a polymer of galactose and 3,6 hydrogalactose. They together polymerize to form an agarose gel. The source of agarose was seaweeds. For example, the two examples that are commonly known that you may have studied are Gelidium and Gracilaria. So these are the two seaweeds which are the main producers. This particular gel actually it comes in the form of a powder, and what we do is that you can just weigh the powder and then create gels of varying percentages. Okay, and what happens is that the more the percentage class, the more the gel percentage is high, the more the percentage of the gel is, the lesser will be the smaller will be the pore size. Okay, so the kind of gels that are used are, for example, people use 0.4 to 0.5% gels, then we use 0.8% gels, then we use 1% gels, 1.5% gel, and after that no more further. Why no more further? Because when we have more than 2% of the gel, then the gel almost becomes brittle. That means it will be too solid and the pores will be too small that the separation will become impossible, right? So we cannot use beyond 2%. Likewise, we can use less than, for example, 0.4 or 0.5%. Why? Because when we use less than 0.4 or 0.5% gel class, then the gel will be too soft, too fragile, right? And it will be so fragile that it will be difficult to handle. So it will be really a soft gel. And I'll be explaining you how to prepare these gels, but first to give you an idea, like to start with, how to decide on what kind of gels should be used. So 1% gel, that means, class, have you studied this before or no? Should I explain you all of these?
Yes, ma'am. You can please explain.
Okay, so 0.4 to 0.5% gel. Okay, at least this much I told you. So 0.4 to 0.5% gel versus 2% gel. Which one will have bigger pores?
0.4 to 0.5% gel.
Right. So bigger pores. So that means let's talk about the separation of the following types of DNA. So high molecular weight genomic DNA. When I say high molecular weight genomic DNA, I'm talking about the strands that you have collected in today's class, right? The ones which were collected with the help of a pipette tip. Low molecular weight DNA, that means this is sheared. That means the strands are broken. And how is this possible? This is possible when some of the students, when they try to collect the strands, you suck in and suck out. And during this process of pipetting in and out, the DNA can get sheared. Okay, then you can have plasmid DNA, and this can vary in the sizes of 1 kb to as high as up to 20 kb, let's say. Then you can have small oligonucleotides, can be in the range of 50 base pairs, and then you can have small DNA fragments be in the range of let's say 200 to maybe 500 base pairs, right? So now based upon the logic that we discussed just now, that lesser the percentage of the gel, the bigger the pore size. Higher the percentage of the gel, smaller will be the pore size. Inverse correlation. So now you are going to tell me which one will go where. Let me see who is going to try. Ayush. Let's start with high molecular weight genomic DNA. So which one should we use?
The lesser percentage gel, because it could be have more larger pores.
Very good. So high molecular weight genomic DNA will go here. Okay, next. Prashant is there or left?
Yes, ma'am, present.
Prashant, okay, tell me Prashant, low molecular weight genomic DNA or anyone that you would like to try? Plasmid DNA. Which gel should we use? So the logic is there is inverse correlations. So let's try match the following. You need to be fast. Okay, then let me try to recall who else is present. Dhwani is there or left already?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. So
So
tell
I
me.
guess so in this the smallest molecule here I can say is the small oligonucleotides. So that could be 2% gel. Then the next bigger than this would be small DNA fragments. So that would be 1.5% gel.
Okay.
Bigger than this is plasmid DNA, that's 1% gel. And then of course 0.8% is a lower molecular weight genomic DNA.
Yours following or no? So this concept is clear that the more the gel percentage is, I'll not explain you during the lab. You will have to, I'll just give you a bottle of agarose and I will give you the samples. You will have to pick up and decide. So hope it is clear to the class.
Yes.
Ma'am, I have one doubt. Uh, you said that the DNA could be shared while pipetting. We also centrifuged the DNA, the cells initially to separate
Right,
all of
right.
this at
Yes.
speeds that could range up to like 12,000 RPM. Doesn't that affect the DNA also?
No, so what happens is that when we use 12,000 RPM, so in this case, there is sometimes lysis of cells, but usually because the way we are preparing, we are collecting like only the bigger strands. So if you look at this particular figure, so what you see is that you are seeing these strands, and these strands are collected with the help of a pipette tip. But when we look at this blue solution, this will contain sheared chromosomal DNA. So it will remain in the solution, and once you centrifuge this blue solution, you will have actually sheared genomic DNA as well as small plasmids. So many a times when students, they do not get good quality chromosomal DNA, so they do not get strands. But in this case, what you can do is you can simply centrifuge the preparation, and then you will get the chromosomal DNA as well as plasmids in case it has. But again, to answer your question, like the genomic DNA, whether it's really high molecular weight or whether it is not at all sheared, so when we try to separate the chromosomal DNA and when we try to study the different sizes of the DNA, then in that case there is a different technique that is used, and that is called as pulse field gel electrophoresis, which I'll be explaining you hopefully in today's class, otherwise in tomorrow's class. So that technique, Dhwani, is used when we talk about comparing the sizes. But then that equipment is too expensive, point number one. Point number two, that the gels which are run by pulse field gel electrophoresis, they take really long. So for example, they take like overnight. The gels are too difficult to handle, the gels are large, so they are not used when you talk about high molecular weight genomic DNA for routine preparations, for example for Sanger sequencing, for next generation sequencing. We do not use PFGE. We use PFGE only and only when we want to really figure out like what are the different sizes of the chromosomal DNA or something like this. Like you have isolated a new strain and you are confused whether it is the same strain or it's a different strain. So in such cases we use PFGE. Otherwise the method that I described you just now, that works. You can just collect the bigger strands.
Okay, ma'am, got it.
Okay, so then, so this is how you can actually separate the DNA by preparing different types of gels. These gels are called, they look like this. So this is a typical figure of a horizontal gel electrophoresis assembly, and therefore when we run these Akeros this is also as, this uses horizontal gel. Reason we are using this term horizontal gel electrophoresis because we do perform vertical gel electrophoresis as well, which I'll be explaining you. This is also called as submerged gel electrophoresis. The reason it is called as submerged gel electrophoresis because in this case the gel is submerged in a buffer. So the buffer that is used is called running buffer, and this running buffer actually contains TAE, which is tris acetate EDTA, or it contains TBE, which is tris sporate EDTA. So this is required for running the gels. These gels, when we prepare them, right, these gels can be of two types. We have pre-stained gels and perform post-staining. Okay, so then the question is, what is staining? Staining is the staining of a DNA. So this is performed with the help of a dye, which is actually called as staining dye. So the staining dye which is used in Akeros genesis for observing the DNA is actually called ethidium bromide, right? ETBR in short, ETBR. ethidium bromide. So ethidium bromide actually it is a dye which intercalates between the double-stranded DNA. It intercalates between the double-stranded DNA, and what happens is that when you incubate it with this dye, then you can observe this DNA under UV light. It will appear like a orange colored band, and it will glow under UV light. Right, so depending upon this, the use of this ETBR, the gels can be pre-stained gels. That means when you are preparing the agarose gel, so during the time of preparation you mix it with ETBR, right? So these gels are called pre-stained gels. Now this ETBR is actually a carcinogen, it is a mutagen. So whenever you are performing the experiments with gels which are pre-stained gels, or whenever you are handling ethidium bromide, make sure that you wear gloves because this is a potent mutagen and carcinogen. So it's dangerous.
Ma'am,
Yes.
ma'am, what if we don't use ethidium bromide, then also DNA absorbs like UV light.
No. So what will happen is that, so again, the question is the so the question is when we run it on a gel, then you cannot observe. So there is a concentration. So let me give you this also. So DNA up to 40 nanograms or more is visible on a gel. If the concentration is less than 40 nanograms, the DNA will not be visible on the gel. So Ratnesh, the concentrations that you are talking about, so when we talk about the observing the DNA under UV light, so there we use a spectrophotometer where the concentrations are too less and you can measure it. But here in this case, we want to observe it. So in this case, on a gel, you require a minimum concentration, and for that we use a dye so that the concentration is very clear. It's very clearly, the band is very clearly visible, right? So in this case we use ethidium bromide. We can also use certain other dyes which are called safe dyes. So safe dyes are actually fluorescent dyes. Class?
Okay, no, ma'am. I was talking like when we DNA denatures, then we use like UV light to what is called to
Right.
see that how much denatured like that.
Yes, Ratnesh, you are very correct. We are going to discuss that technique, which I promised you that we will be discussing in one of the classes. That is about the chord curves. So that is when you are observing using a different method. We are using spectrophotometer, but in this case you are observing it on a gel. So if you want to observe it on a gel, first thing is, because the DNA is buried inside the gel, it is entangled in the agarose. So in this case, you need to have a certain concentration of the DNA. If the concentration is too less, it will not be visible. It will not be visible. And you need to stain it with a dye. Then only it will be visible. Right?
Yes, ma'am. Okay.
So in this case, we are using either ETBR or you can use fluorescent dyes such as Psi5, Psi3, etc. So these are cyanine dyes. And then using these dyes, you can actually perform pre-stained gels or post-staining. Pre-staining means you mix the dye with the gel, and post-staining is when you perform the electrophoresis and then you immerse the gel in a staining solution, right? Now the question is how to identify whether the DNA has traveled or completed how to identify whether the electrophoresis is complete or not, right? When to stop the run, because DNA otherwise is not visible unless and until you expose it to UV light, correct? And what will happen is, class, this is important for you to understand that if we expose it to UV light, then what will happen is the DNA can get mutated. UV rays are prone to mutate the DNA, right? So if the more times we observe it under UV light, the more errors you are going to create in your DNA. Following or no?
Yes, ma'am.
Right. So in this case, what we use is that we do not, even if we stain it with ethidium bromide, you will have to observe it under UV light, right? Even if we use a fluorescent dye, it will require exposure to some rays. So therefore, what is done is we use a dye which is called as a loading dye, right? The loading dye that is used is actually called bromophenol blue. The name itself says that it is a blue colored dye. What happens is that this bromophenol blue, this has a molecular weight in such a range that it runs at a size of approximately 500 base pairs. Okay, so what will happen is that this loading dye which is bromophenol blue, when it reaches up to the end, then in fact you can stop the run, and this blue colored dye, it is visible to naked eyes. Now the question is, the DNA appears transparent, but when we mix it with bromophenol blue, it will give a blue color, correct? What we need to add in the loading dye is actually, sometimes we also add glycerol. Okay. We also add TCl is the buffer that is used, EDTA. So in this case, EDTA is used because it chelates magnesium ions. These magnesium ions, please pay attention over here. These magnesium ions are cofactors for the enzymes, which are called DNases, which can DNA. And therefore, when we preserve the DNA, the DNA is also preserved in a buffer for long-term storage. The strands that you had collected at the time of genomic DNA isolation, this is also preserved in a buffer called TE buffer, where T stands for TCl and E stands for EDTA. And here the purpose of EDTA is to chelate magnesium ions, which are cofactors for DNases, which can degrade the DNA. So in this case, EDTA is working like a protective reagent. It is preventing the DNA from degradation. Following or no? Don't sleep.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so then which 10? Maybe I'll wind up here just to explain you this loading dye. So in loading dye, you need to have all of these components. So bromophenol blue is to mark the front, like when exactly to stop the run. Sucrose or glycerol is added because loading the sample flask, when we are loading the sample has to go inside the well, right? So for that, if you do not have sucrose or glycerol, then the sample will pop out into the buffer and you will not be able to perform electrophoresis. EDTA I explained you just now to take care of the DNA, to protect the DNA from degradation, and TrisCl is the buffer. So if you now look at the gel, so this is the horizontal gel electrophoresis assembly. This is the tank class. So you fill the tank with buffer TAE or TBE. This is the plastic tray and this is the plastic comb, right? What we do is that we seal this plastic tray from both the sides with a sellotape, right? And then what we do is we prepare the agarose gel, 1% gel or 0.8% gel or 0.4% gel, whatever gel. You weigh the amount of agarose, dissolve it in TAE or TBE, heat it in a microwave oven, let it cool down at around 50 degrees, and then you pour it. You pour it in this, and then you allow the gel to solidify. So in this way, when we remove the combs, actually wells will be created, right? So since you people have not seen this, maybe in the next class I will show you a quick video like how we can create the wells and how the loading dye helps in the loading of the DNA. So that, remember the terms, staining means staining the DNA, it's a staining dye, right? It stains the DNA so that the DNA is visible. Loading dye, it helps in the loading of the sample. It helps in marking the front. So this contains bromophenol blue and you can actually mark the front, right? Class, is it clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So maybe I'll stop the class, stop the meeting today, and we'll resume the discussion in tomorrow's class. If you have any questions, ask me, otherwise we'll resume in tomorrow's class. Okay.
No, ma'am, no questions.
Okay.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.